Hello, good day everyone. It gives me great joy to see you again in this video. I want to be addressing a different issue today, corruption and society. Isn't that interesting? Corruption and society is what I'll be talking about today. I originally wanted to title this video differently, but I just think it's more straightforward to talk about corruption and society. And I'll be addressing this topic from a very pragmatic, a very practical, and a very professional perspective. I will not be unnecessarily theoretical or idealistic at all. And why this video? I just feel corruption is becoming a very serious issue in development terms across the world. You see, there are so many countries today across the world we are essentially trapped in the corruption quagmire. And this has largely affected their development trajectories. So, though it's common to say that most developed countries have systems instituted in places that make corruption very difficult to occur, largely, or talking about large scale compared to many developing countries, where corruption is beginning to be seen as near normal, or moving from corruption to impunity. So corruption has a lot of development implications. In fact, it's now commonly believed that the major reason elements of underdevelopment are common in poor countries. The main reason is corruption, because corruption, when it's pervasive, it becomes very disabling and debilitating in terms of how it affects development. So what is corruption? Today, I want to look at corruption. So it's very common for people to talk about corruption in terms of bribery, in terms of embezzlement. I've actually heard so many people talk about corruption in terms of people in high places in politics, talking about bribery, embezzlement. So when people talk about corruption, they look at the political actors, the politically exposed people, the macro level. So today I will be using sociological insights to talk about corruption, so we can understand it. I actually wanted to title this video "The Sociology of Corruption" initially, but I changed my mind and said I'll simply put it corruption and society, using sociological insight or sociological imagination, as mentioned by Cyril Nimes. So corruption for me today, without sounding unnecessarily academic, I would define corruption to be events or processes through which people circumvent rules and procedures to personally enrich selves or groups. When you have a group of people circumventing, bypassing the laid down rules and procedures that are supposed to checkmate corruption or corrupt practices, rules and procedures are put in places to protect the common good or the goods of everybody. Once people circumvent these rules and procedures, I consider that to be corruption. And this is a professional way to look at corruption. So corruption is not only about embezzlement, bribery, or the rest of it. It's about circumvention of rules and procedures and formal processes, or even informal processes, for personal enrichment or enrichment of the few, the corrupted individual and the cronies. And why is this very important? When you circumvent the rule, you undermine the society. I did a video on gender and society. Society being a group of people relating in orderly manner, obeying norms and values, and if possible, the laws and structures that protect that society. So when people begin to circumvent rules, circumvent common goods, circumvent procedures, systems that are supposed to protect everybody, that's corruption. So, and the important point is this, that everybody must begin to see corruption beyond the macro level. We should begin to look at corruption even from the micro level, that is at individual or interpersonal level. And sociology, being a discipline that is largely concerned with understanding the processes, the pattern, the outcomes, the drivers, the consequences of interpersonal relationship, then that means sociology, we are able to look at this corruption more functionally or more professionally, in the sense that corruption goes beyond what happens at the political space, at the presidency level, at the lawmakers level, at the judiciary level. Corruption is beyond that, and it affects what individuals, even at their micro level, in their mini level, what they are doing. What individuals do at their micro level also have implication for corruption, because it's action of an individual and inaction of another individual that comes together to form society. And even the people at the micro, at the macro level, at the political level, they are from some mini societies. They are from mini groups. So that's why somebody said that a society decides the kind of leader that gets, because leaders are also from a family. They are from different social networks before they emerge leaders where they are. So corruption can only be understood from what happens across levels. You are selling something in the market, how are you dealing with people that you sell things to? Are you not fraudulently taking advantage of them? Even in the school, in your family, in the religious system, in the political system, even in the educational system, in the economic system. What do you do there? Do you not corruptly enrich yourself? And if you corruptly enrich yourself at the expense of others, others in the long run will also look for ways of circumventing the procedure to corruptly enrich themselves. In the final analysis, everybody becomes affected because of the negative consequences of corruption. So stop looking at corruption at the macro level alone. Look at yourself as a key player in society. Look at others next to you. What are you doing? How are you accounting for the rules? How are you obeying the rules? How are you accounting for your actions? Are you concerned with the consequences of your action and how that affects others? And ultimately, how that affects you in the long run. So in the long run, everybody is affected negatively by corruption. That's why, and the major cause of corruption is greed, selfishness, lack of systems, lack of consequences for corrupt behavior. So that's why in many African countries, corruption has gone beyond corruption to what we now call impunity. It's so widespread that everybody, one way or the other, is engaged in one activity or the other that affects that society negatively. So corruption is not just about embezzlement, it's about action and inaction as you interact with others. Financial and non-financial corruption, the way you circumvent the system for personal aggrandizement, for personal enrichment, for personal advantage taking at the expense of every other person in that society. That's corruption. So everybody is involved in the long run. So and I've seen when ratings come and some organizations like Transparency International or all other agencies begin to say a country has performed woefully again on the account of corruption index, some people start celebrating. I wonder, why are you celebrating? Some of them look at it in terms of political system alone and say, our politicians are not doing well. They are not fighting corruption. At your personal level, at interpersonal level, what are you doing? So corruption index does not, or corruption perception index does not only talks about the political level, at the headquarters, maybe at the DC or at Accra, or if you like, at Nairobi, or in Beijing, or in Rio de Janeiro, in Sao Paulo, or any other capital you want to think about. It's not only about the people in power. It talks about what people in that society, what they are doing that is not, that is dangerous, that is making the country to perform woefully. Politicians are also dealing with people who are not politicians. Most of the politicians also have fronts or dummies across places who help them to perpetrate and keep their loot. So when people talk about corruption perception index, a country has done woefully, and people in those countries are saying, wow, it's our government, look at our government, they're not fighting corruption. It talks about everybody in that society. So you have to get that very correctly. So you should be concerned. Is what happens in those through those ratings is an aggregate of what goes on or those things that go on in those countries, in those societies. So it's just aggregate. So stop looking towards the politicians alone when they talk about corruption, as if everybody is involved. And what you have to know is that consequences of corruption ultimately will affect everybody. Everybody is in it. I've edited a book on corruption. I've written articles on corruption. So it affects everybody, and we have to get this very straight. Consequences include collapsed infrastructure, insecurity, unemployment, poverty. Talk about negative outcomes. When you talk about underdevelopment, those things that are not working, look towards corruption as the major cause. Because if you tackle corruption is like an overarching element through which you can understand the factors or the consequences or manifestations of underdevelopment. So until poor countries and other countries fight corruption, and they cannot fight corruption until everybody is able to realize that everybody is a stakeholder. The corruption is not going anywhere, and corruption will never allow sustainable development goals to be realized, to be achieved. So look at interpersonal relationship around. How are you relating? How are people relating? And stop looking at corruption at the macro level. Look at it at the macro, at the same time at the micro, and stop celebrating when they rate countries as performing poorly on corruption, because everybody is involved. So how can you not tackle corruption? Play your part. Realize that corruption is dangerous. Don't take advantage of people around you. Because when you take advantage of people around you, another takes advantage of people around, another takes advantage of people around, this is the aggregate of what turns out to be national corruption debacle. So the solution is to realize that corruption is dangerous, and to realize that everybody has to be accountable, and to realize that everybody must do the right thing, right from the mini market, in the open market, to the stores, to the schools, to the businesses, to the politicians, to social media. Everybody has to come to the realization that nobody is going anywhere positive until everybody stands against corruption and realize that it's dangerous, and we are all involved. You are involved. I am involved in what is happening in terms of corruption across the world. Stop blaming politicians alone. You have a role to play. Until everybody comes on board, corruption is not going anywhere, and everybody will suffer for it. So, rise against corruption. Stop being corrupt and hold others accountable. Until I see you in the next video, enjoy yourself and stop corruption.